Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Reading Recap for weeks 1 through 4. During the first 4 weeks of this semester, you should have been reading between the two textbooks, Gale and Atkinson, as well as Sir Giovanni. And what I wanted to do is just kind of highlight some of the key themes or the takeaways you should have gathered from reading through those chapters. And so we're just going to do a quick recap of the material. And then as we're going through the information, I'm going to talk a little bit about the quiz that you're going to take. And the quiz is based upon the reading. So make sure that you do go through and complete the readings. But in chapter 1 of Sir Giovanni, the focus that we were looking at is who's to blame when students don't perform. And the goal that we were really focusing on is outside pressure that comes into place when schools and students are not performing. And so specifically, we were looking at the use of sanctions, direct monitoring, and accountability, and how these three different instruments can be used or can be manifested in the form of standards, a push on really dealing with cultural sensitivity, and also the evaluation of instruction. In Gale and Atkinson, the focus here was, or more specifically, we were being introduced to clinical supervision. Now, clinical supervision is really the process of a planning conference, classroom observation, and feedback conference. These three elements are the key component that's associated with when we're talking about teacher evaluations. And the focus here is on maintaining a neutral stance and collecting and reviewing the data throughout the process. Now, the goal is to improve the teacher's classroom instruction. And you're going to see examples of these formats in some of the short videos that are going to be shown and that have been shown. Really pay attention to see how that clinical supervision is being manifested in those videos. Now, one key challenge that's inherent with clinical supervision is that traditionally, when we think about evaluations, it's always been a top-down process whereby the supervisor is making all the decisions. The supervisor primarily is being viewed as the inspector. They're identifying what's working, what's not working in the classroom, or what's not working in the delivery instruction. Our goal is to kind of move away from that. That's not really the mindset that we really want to have. We want to kind of focus on more so of using evaluations as a form of professional development, really trying to nurture and encourage teachers to really excel. And so we're going to really spend some time talking about that. Now, also one of the other things that Gale and Atkinson describe is an example of that professional development. Now, they point out two different approaches. There is the nose to nose as well as the side by side. And when we're talking about nose to nose, that means you're having a dialogue between the supervisor and the teacher, side by side. Again, the supervisor and the teacher are actually looking at data. Maybe they're looking at a video of the teacher's performance, but they are working together, kind of more of colleagues reviewing and kind of identifying a common goal. Whereas the nose to nose is kind of looking at and dialoguing about what's taking place, or maybe even establishing goals. Now, again, our goal is to focus on improving classroom instruction. And so when we talk about improving classroom instruction, we really want to focus on specific objectives, such as giving feedback on the teaching practices instructions, identifying and pointing out instructional problems in a classroom, helping the instructor or the teacher develop the necessary teaching skills that they can begin using in their classroom, and then also evaluating teachers for the purpose of promotion, or also identifying teachers that need to kind of be transitioned on. And then lastly, we're going to also focus on developing a positive attitude about professional development. Very often teachers have a negative, and most educators have a negative view about it. And we kind of want to change that and use the evaluation process as a way of helping them improve their practice. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the good theory and action theory that was promoted in the reading. And really what that consists of is when we're talking about that is we're looking at the learning process of a reflective practitioner. And these are the elements that are associated with it. It's recognizing educational dilemmas, responding to a dilemma by recognizing both the similarities to other situations and the unique qualities of the particular situation, framing and deframing the dilemma, experimenting with the dilemma to discover the implications of various solutions, examining the intended and unintended consequences of an implemented solution and evaluating it by determining whether consequences are desirable. Now, this view on reflective practice will drive much of the material we will look at in the weeks to come. And again, for Gale and Atkinson, they believe that it provides strong support for clinical supervision as a critical process, that this process needs to have a more prominent role in how or more so in teacher education programs. So let's go ahead and continue on. So looking at Sir Giovanni. In Sir Giovanni, in chapter 9, the tools that he talks about that are used for supervising, one of them is self-evaluation. Now, this is the process of evaluating whereby you're looking at more of an internal dialogue about oneself as intrinsically valuable and about life experiences and as being personally valuable. There's next one is formative evaluation. This is the instance of providing feedback while an activity is occurring in progress. Best way to think of that is coaching, where you have someone that is actually performing and you're kind of correcting them afterwards rather than waiting till it's done. If you're waiting till it's done, that's an autopsy. You're basically going in and seeing why something didn't go well. Now, some educational proponents support the use of the term assessments over evaluation. That assertion is that supervisors and teachers work together to assess student learning. Now, under this model, the focus is not on judging the effectiveness of the teacher, but on the impact of different pedagogical strategies on student learning. Now, the focus here, though, is to do that is you really got to focus on collaboration. A key element of this process is that of ongoing conversations between supervisors and between them and teachers. And we're going to be talking a lot about it. We started talking about it before. Now, these conversations touch on the teacher's pedagogical strategies, their academic knowledge, the social cultural context of the learners, their home context, their personal interests and talents, and so on. Now, some of the purposes of supervisory activity is we also have to look at it that there is a bureaucratic element to it. Now, this is the part that consists of the campus administrator or district administrator visiting the teacher's classroom and conducting an observation for the teacher, just showing that the teacher is teaching. And for the most part, the administrator would evaluate the teacher on a 3 to 4 point scale. Form would be filled out, given to the teacher, and later placed in the teacher's permanent file. And it's basically its goal is to meet some kind of legal requirement. And next one we have is formative purpose. This evaluative format tends to be more diagnostic. Now, unlike the bureaucratic evaluation, that's where you're just doing the evaluation because you have to. It's not really meant to grow from it. It's just checking the boxes. The formative process tends to be more diagnostic. And here, one of the things is it's primarily defined as a relation, based upon the relationship between the supervisor and the teacher. It's more collaborative. It can involve multiple teachers or district personnel. And again, specific attention is given to the teacher's relationship with their students, their content knowledge, and their design and implementation of varied activities that promote student learning. So again, the focus is going to be before the lesson, during, and after the lesson. Collegial dialogue, these are all part of that process. And then we also have summative purpose. And again, this approach focus on evaluating the desired outcome of the teacher. Now, reliance is on utilizing multiple evidence sources to show that students are successfully learning the material. And again, under this model, assessment tends to be more broad range. It tends to be more of a collaborative relationship between the teacher and supervisor. This approach might be employed in determining whether to grant a teacher tenure as part of their process of whether or not of retaining a teacher. And it might also be used to move a teacher on if a teacher is not really performing well. You find that this tends to be more the case when you are evaluating a probationary teacher. So let's continue on here. Chapter 10, we were looking at the differences between clinical supervision and coaching. Now, there's a lot of similarity between the two. And so when we talk about the two, clinical supervision focuses on both the teacher and the supervisor identifying different types of pedagogical strategies that can be employed to improve student engagement for a particular lesson. This process often involves face-to-face interactions between the teacher and the supervisor with the goal of helping the teacher improve the quality of instruction being delivered while also helping them grow as a professional. Now, the evidence they collect from this collaboration can be used in reviewing the teacher's effectiveness. And so some of the elements that go within it is we have our pre-observation where you're going in and here again, the focus is on the teacher and the supervisor meeting and kind of identifying what are the things that the supervisor is going to be looking for when they come into the classroom. The second step is the observation. And again, this is the focus here is on what the teacher says, What are the students doing? How do they respond to the teacher? Or specifically, how are the students responding to the teacher? And what is occurring during the observation? The third step is an analysis and organization of the data for feedback. This is where the supervisor goes back, reviews the information, and then provides the teacher with analysis of what was taking place in the classroom. And the conversations from that are going to basically focus on connecting what was discussed during the pre-observation and did it match up with what took place with the observation. The fourth step is the post-observation conference. This conference focuses on addressing previously discussed issues that were identified. So this is where you're kind of putting it all together. Pre-observation is between the supervisor and the teacher. Observation is what the supervisor is seeing. Analysis is what the supervisor is doing in terms of did what the teacher initially planned actually manifests itself in the lesson. And then the fourth step, the post-observation, is where you're going back and having that discussion with the teacher about what took place. Did these things occur? Asking the teacher, how did the lesson go? What do you think? Where do you think it went well? Where do you think it didn't go well? So that's all part of the post-observation. And then lastly, the post-conference. The post-conference is more so of a reflection for the supervisor. So here there are three parts to this. The first part is that the supervisor does a self-assessment of their own supervising capability. Think of it as they're doing their own calibration. The supervisor needs to reflect on what areas they themselves as a supervisor need to improve upon. The second part is that they need to do a reflection on what the supervision process looks like. In other words, are they comfortable with their data tools that they use? Do they feel that it was honest, it was unbiased? Um, will working with the teacher through the cycle improve student learning? Sometimes you might go through the process of appraising and looking at a teacher, and when you're done, you realize that the effort that you put in may not really produce the results you're looking for, or more intervention might really be needed to kind of help transition and move this teacher to a higher level of performance. So that's all part of what the post conference consists of, where it's more of a reflective process for the supervisor or the appraiser and whether or not what they were doing was effective, and then more so what are the next steps, what needs to be done next to really kind of help drive instruction. And so here's an example, a diagram that the book gives us in terms of what it looks like. So we have our pre-observation cycle, then we go to observation collection, analysis, post-observation conference, and then post-conference. And then if we need to meet with the teacher again, we just repeat the cycle, continuing to move on and kind of improve upon the practice. And then some of the last things that we want to talk about for chapter 10 is coaching. Now, there's some similarity between the two, but some of the key elements that we need to identify between the two is that of coaching is that of having an affirming presence, or think of it an enabling presence or a critical presence. When we talk about affirming presence, we mean treating those we are working with a high level of respect and appreciation. When we talk about enabling presence, we want to have the view that uh, that no one's an island and that we all have to work together, that we all can't do it alone, but we need other people to kind of support and gird us into being able to do better. Uh, Bottom line, we all need help. And then critical presence, this is the presence that focuses on drawing attention to the standards and expectations that are inherent with the work that needs to be done. Our focus is on what constitutes a good job or what needs to be done to really get better at our practice. And the focus here is on giving honest feedback about what is going right and what isn't. Very often we talk about having a critical conversation. Sometimes that's hard, but it's just being very honest. Someone said a long time ago, if you have someone that's cooking a meal for you and you don't like it, you better be honest and tell them up front. Otherwise, you might go years eating that. And then when you finally say something, they're going to be hurt saying, why didn't you say something sooner? So it's important to be very honest when you're going through and going through this process. And then lastly, in chapter 2, we were looking at central office support. And so what we did was we explored the role and the types of support offered from central office. And these can range from the role of central office in setting and reinforcing district policy, drawing educators' attention to the district's vision for student learning, for the value and importance of changes to the content and to the curriculum and practices being employed in classrooms across the district. Very often, if you have a teacher that's not performing, You just can't arbitrarily go out and implement and make certain decisions. You're going to need the backing of central office in being able to address it. And very often, when teachers are being appraised, and if they don't agree with their appraisal, in many districts, they have an option of requesting a second appraisal, and that's generally carried out by someone in central office. So it's important to understand that that role is going to be kind of coming in and providing the additional support to the campus. So that's one of the things that central office is going to perform. So those are the general themes that you should have really been looking at. Now, in preparation for the test, some of the things to kind of give you, or the quiz, some things just to kind of be aware of, is as you're reading through the material and preparing to take your quiz, here's some things that you need to really pay attention to. Know what the purpose of the goal setting conference is. One of the videos is going to talk about it. But when we talk about a goal setting conference, why are we doing that? What is the purpose of that? What does it mean when we talk about scientific management or moral authority, or even when we talk about reflective practice? What does that mean? We've talked about collaboration, but what does it mean by when we also talk about collaborative practice? Then you should also be able to identify what does it mean by technical and didactic models. What is the goal of clinical supervision and what are the steps that are connected with it? Just kind of identified some of them, but make sure you can identify what it is. Make sure you also know what formative processes or formative purpose. What is that? Know what is and not aligned to effective teaching, at least according Marzano. And he talks about that in one of the little video clips about these are the things that really help improve a teacher's effect, making a teacher more effective. There's some things that don't help a teacher become more effective. And what is it that does not help them become more effective? So those are some things that you really need to be aware of. Now, if you can go through and identify what all of those that I just listed, what they really mean, you're going to do very well on the quiz. So I will be doing another one of these before the next quiz, just to kind of giving you a review, but it doesn't mean that you should not be reading the material, just so that you understand what's going on. I will see you next time. And again, feel free to email me if you have any questions.